Hey guys, Graham Langdon here, and I am currently in Mauritania, Africa, searching for Atlantis. For those of you who don't know me and don't know my backstory, I began researching ancient civilizations about 15 to 18 years ago when I randomly picked up the book Underworld by Graham Hancock. My mind was blown at 18. Every civilization on Earth pretty much has a flood myth of some way, shape, or form, and some of them are really similar to each other. And you have to imagine that they come from a shared ancestral myth. But yeah, so my mind was blown at 18, researching these ancient myths and these ancient civilizations, and just becoming aware for the first time how much we don't know about our ancient past, how much question and mystery really surrounds everything that happened before Mesopotamia. So that brings us to Mauritania, because we still have never found Atlantis, and millions of people have seen now the Bright Insight video where Jimmy popularizes a theory that originally was presented in a documentary on the Gaia channel for the Richat Structure being Atlantis. And the more research and investigation you do into this theory, the more it starts to look like the Richat Structure might actually be Atlantis, as crazy as that sounds. And trust me, I would not be risking my personal safety, my health, and my well-being coming to Mauritania if I was not compelled by the theory. If a flood the size of, essentially the entire country of Mauritania washed over the Richat Structure, there would not be much left above ground. I mean, we're hoping to find some carved blocks or something, but that amount of water and that amount of impact, there would just be nothing left, folks. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm risking every hepatitis known to man: yellow fever, typhoid, cholera, measles, mumps, rubella, malaria, muggings, robberies. I don't think that's going to happen. Certainly all travel to the country is ill-advised. If you go by the State Department or WikiTravel, they say basically no one should travel here under any reason. If you do, no one should leave Nouakchott for any reason, especially not to the east, which is exactly where we're going. Okay, so let's go. You'll have to forgive me, guys. I'm not a YouTuber. If I'm not great at editing or cinematography, I apologize. I'm making this video just because I want to add my voice to the chorus of voices around the mysteries surrounding our ancient past, and in particular my thoughts on the Richat. Okay, so let's dive into it. In Cretaceous, Plato says, "The country immediately about and surrounding the city was a level plain. This part of the island looked towards the south and was sheltered from the north. The size of a lot was a square of 10 stadia each way, and the total number of all the lots was 60,000. So approaching the Richat Structure from Nouakchott, this is exactly what you encounter, is just this flat level plain for literally hundreds of kilometers. Now, Plato said that there were 60,000 lots on this plain, and each lot was 10 stadia in length. So this was a massive flat plain. And again, approaching the Richat from the south, from Nouakchott, you have hundreds of kilometers of this flat plain. So next, Plato describes these mountains, and he says, the surrounding mountains were celebrated for their number and size and beauty. And as we get about 100 kilometers outside the Richat, look what kind of terrain we get into. It goes from flat plain to these massive mountains just rising up from the plain. And honestly, it is stunning and beautiful and amazing. It feels like you're driving through the Grand Canyon. You're just driving through flat plain for hundreds of kilometers, and all of a sudden you're driving through the Grand Canyon and up into the Grand Canyon. I mean, that's what it feels like. So it seems like the Richat Structure is just coming into view. Is that the Richat ahead? Wild camels hanging out in the center of the Richat. at the mouth of the Richat Structure. And it's beautiful. I mean, to be honest, I'm completely blown away by the fact that at the mouth of the Richat Structure, there's this village of Ouadane, and they are still building their structures the exact way that Plato described. They're building simple structures with red, white, and black stones, sometimes arranging them and varying them to be pleasing to the eye. I mean, this is exactly what he described, and this is exactly what the people at the mouth of the Richat Structure are still doing. I mean, we have clear anthropological evidence at this point of these construction techniques, the exact same that he's describing. So this is how Plato described the construction techniques and style in Atlantis. The stone which was used in the work was white, another black, and a third red. Some of their buildings were simple, but in others they put together different stones, varying the color to please the eye and to be a natural source of delight. So here we are approaching the town of Ouadane at the mouth of the Richat Structure, and you can see their simple construction techniques with white, black, and red stone. And here we are driving past one of the buildings in the town, also a simple structure built with white, black, and red stone. And here we are looking at one of the buildings where they've arranged all of the white stone in a way that's particularly pleasing to the eye. I'm here at the center of the Richat Structure, and if you believe that this is Atlantis, then this would be where the temple to Poseidon was constructed. And what's really cool is you can see behind me one of the simple structures that they've built out of red, black, and white stone. There's actually a few of these structures around here. So guys, I think this definitely is one argument in favor of the Richat being Atlantis. We have a perfect cultural analog where they're still building today the exact types of structures that Plato described. It's pretty exciting to think that if the Temple of Poseidon was here in the center of the Richat Structure, that the gold spires and the silver walls and foundations might be laying somewhere here under the sand, possibly right underneath my feet. It'd be really exciting for someone to do some professional excavations out here, get some earth moving equipment out here, and do some excavations. This place is just absolutely massive. So even though the center island is more of a basin than a plain, Plato does say that the stone which was used in the work was quarried from the center island, and he also references a mountain that is not very high in the center island. And one thing I want to mention about the center of the Richat is that the center is actually a crater. It's not as though the center island is completely one level plain. The center island is a crater. And there's a ring that goes around, and there's some mountains. Maybe you can see them in the distance rising behind my head. There's mountains, piles of rubble essentially, and then there's just this crater in the center. What we're looking at here is the opening to the south. If the Richat Structure is Atlantis, as Plato described, it opened to the sea to the south, and this would be exactly what we're looking at. I'm on one ring, the outermost ring. I'm standing on top of it now, and I'm looking across at what would have been, I guess, the entry port. Look at this. I'm going to turn the view around and you can just see where the ring continues on and then bends away far into the horizon. Wow, it's incredible. I mean, can you just imagine what this would have looked like with merchant ships passing in and out, ports of entry, towers, shops, temples, houses built all on these rings? the city would have been absolutely massive. So I'm walking along one of the outer rings, and what is amazing to me is how level these rings are. And you do see a lot of natural hills that kind of come up and then have a slope. And these outer rings, they kind of come up, they slope up like a hill, and then the tops are just completely cut and leveled. And just walking along the width of this thing, it's pretty clear that there would have been plenty of room to build houses, habitations, buildings. I mean, again, I don't think they were megalithic at all. Otherwise you would find megaliths and boulders here. But I do think that if these are the ruins of Atlantis, this could very well be what sparked the genesis of megalithic culture. I mean, it's just eerie how level it is, to be honest. It's so perfectly flat, and then you look around in a circle and it's completely flat across the entire circle. I mean, it does not deviate whatsoever. And even where you see it start to slope up, and it's cut off and then flat, then slopes back down. And then, but within the same landscape, the area that would have been under the water, you can see where it comes up, slopes, and then comes back down. So, I don't know, folks. I think this would be an argument in favor of it being Atlantis. The fact that you get up to these rings, they are perfectly level. Now, I would love to find a road or some pavement or something that indicates in any way that, I guess, there was a racetrack around one of these outer rings. They would race horses, according to Plato. I don't see any evidence of that, but I don't know. I don't know if natural forces, volcanism, what have you, can create these perfectly level rings. I mean, it is just perfectly level. It looks like it's been paved, even though I'm walking through a field of rubble. It looks like it's been paved. It's completely flat. Completely flat. So, I don't know, folks. Again, walking around on the ground, it doesn't feel like ruins. You know, there's no ruins. There's no temples or structures or pyramids or anything like that. It's basically just rubble everywhere, which is what you would expect to find if the buildings were simple and got smashed with a wave the size of Mauritania. The feeling that you get on the ground is that it's been shaped by completely natural forces, but Plato himself said that it was shaped partially by nature and partially by man. No one ever said that Atlantis was completely man-made. Plato said that humans reshaped a natural structure. Essentially is what he said. So, I don't know, folks. Look, I'm going to turn the camera around. Look at how flat and level these rings are. I'm just going to do a 360 here, and you can see for yourself. I mean, it's like standing on level ground. So, do you believe that the volcanism and the natural forces at work here could have sufficiently leveled not only one ring, but two rings, and made them completely level without so much? I mean, it's eerie. You look around at the horizon, and it's just all completely level. So, we have been exploring the Richat all day. One thing I can say is that I saw absolutely no signs of civilization, no megaliths, nothing, which is what you would expect. I mean, if a flood the size of Mauritania washed over the Richat Structure 10,000 years ago, there would be nothing left. Plato didn't describe a megalithic city. He described a city of simple construction. It's possible that this was Atlantis. I certainly think it's possible. If it was, there's absolutely nothing left of it whatsoever. It would have been an incredible sight to see during its habitable period. So, you know, it could be that Atlantis was destroyed in a single day, and because of that, they decided to start building with megaliths. I mean, that could be the onset, the genesis of megalithic architecture right there. Could have been the destruction of Atlantis. They built this incredible bustling city, this metropolis, the first metropolis ever, or at least one of them, right? We can't discount Gunung Padang. We can't discount Göbekli Tepe, which was contemporary at the same time period over in Turkey. Not too far from here, but definitely across the continent. But perhaps that's why they shifted to megalithic architecture. Maybe they didn't want a flood to destroy their entire city again, so they decided to build with larger stones. I mean, it makes so much sense, doesn't it? Sorry, there's a lot of flies here. There's an infection, a parasitic infection called leishmaniasis, which you definitely do not want to get. If you get bit by a sandfly, they can infect you with a parasite, and that parasite basically becomes a flesh-eating disease, and then you can never get rid of it. Check out this beautiful sunset. Hold on. That is just something. Oh, look at that. I don't know, guys. We're going to need more work to figure this out. I don't think that me visiting the site for a couple of days is going to get to the bottom of this any more so than, you know, anyone already has. But if you want to see the ruins of Atlantis, come to the Richat Structure, come to Mauritania, because even if it isn't, the real thing would probably look pretty goddamn close, to be honest. Yeah, it's gotta be it. Alright guys, it's day 2 in the Richat Structure. We camped in the Richat last night with some nomads, some desert nomads who were friendly. We made some tea, we had some food. Hopefully we're gonna get to some interesting features today. We're just gonna keep looking, folks. We're gonna keep looking for signs of civilization, signs for habitation, any sort of ancient roads, canals. I'm not holding my breath that we're gonna find any megaliths, but if we could find any evidence of ancient roads, ancient canals, things like that, then we can lend further weight to the Atlantis theory. So, keep you posted throughout the day and see what we find. Here's another piece of evidence we found, guys. Plato said that once Atlantis sunk, the entire surrounding region became an impassable mud flat. And what do we have right between the rings of the Richat but mud? I'm gonna turn it around and show you. Just look at how level that is. We're looking at the outermost ring, and it stretches as far as the eye can see until cracked, flat, dry mud. You get to the inner ring. Just look at how far that is. I mean, it's so far away, the outermost ring, that it looks purple, and you can see that it's completely level off in the distance. So, think of it what you will. Thermometer reads about 120 degrees, maybe 115. Here we see some large rocks. Again, folks, this is not bedrock. These are just large boulders covered in the sand on the south side, on the west side of the southern, what would have been the southern entry port. We're gonna climb to the top of this thing and see what it looks like at the top. Again, the Richat structure is just absolutely massive. It's so gigantic that once you get here and you're standing inside of it, you wonder how the heck you could ever possibly hope to make sense of it. And I really feel like just the more time you spend, see, I haven't seen a rock this big the entire time I've been here. I haven't seen a rock this big or this big the entire time I've been here. This is an incredibly large rock as far as the Richat structure is concerned. There's just no rocks of that size. Now we're getting into some bedrock here. You can see where it's been sheared away. You know, people have been here. It's obvious to see these little standing structures. Just look at that. It's loose. It's not part of the bedrock. This is loose. Loose. So there's some very large loose stones. Again, this would have been the port of entry for the Richat. It's just absolutely massive, and you can see there where it levels out. Look how level that is. So, you know, I've been taken to someone who collects artifacts from within and around the Richat, and look at this beautiful polished granite. It almost looks like something you'd find in Egypt. I'm a little bit shocked to find it here. Perfectly polished and smooth. Here we have a small jar. A lot of axe heads, adzes. You can just see what a wealth of artifacts. And this is just one person. I'm told there are several artifact dealers in and around the Richat. You see stone spheres. These are all real artifacts, folks, but we have no idea what time period they date to. They're clearly Neolithic, I would say. This looks like a lingam from India. And again, you have stone spheres, more stone spheres. Look at the size of this arrowhead or flashpoint. It's just massive. Imagine the weapon that thing would have created. Another huge flashpoint or arrowhead. So here's a little known fact. All of the freshwater fossils they've found in the Richat structure, like this one, have all dated to between 15,000 and 8,000 years before present. Here, I'll pull up the Wikipedia article. All the freshwater remains they found have been dated to the supposed time of Atlantis. So I just finished exploring the Richat structure for the last 2 days, and I've had about half a day to process everything that I saw. And to be honest, it's a little bit overwhelming when you get there because the site is so massive and so vast, it's very easy to get disoriented. Anyway, what everyone wants to know, the big question, was this Atlantis? And after exploring it for 2 days and really taking it all in, no one can say for sure whether it is or isn't. It would take a decade of excavation to be able to settle it one way or the other, and that's not going to happen anytime soon. No one can go to the Richat Structure and observe it for a couple of days and tell you whether or not it is Atlantis. What I will say is this. I'm inclined to believe still that it is, and here's why. A, there's nothing left. Do not go to the Richat Structure expecting to find ruins of a city or ruins of any sort. Everything, if there was anything there at any time, it is all just completely gone. But what I found compelling and fascinating and intriguing was the fact that in the town, just at the mouth of the Richat Structure, you have all of these buildings, these simple buildings made out of white, black, and red stone, just as Plato described. And they build these buildings right onto the bedrock. It's not part of the Richat proper, but it's basically an extension of the Richat Structure is the bedrock that these buildings are built on. So you have a perfect analog for exactly what Plato is describing right there at the mouth of the Richat. It's almost like an Atlantis museum. It's like, hey, look at what the buildings of Atlantis used to look like. This was not a megalithic culture if it was Atlantis. And that makes sense because megalithic culture, you know, seems to have sprung up around 4000 BC, maybe older. I mean, a lot of these sites, it does seem like the largest, most precisely cut megaliths do go back older. But even if they go back a few thousand years older, civilization probably did not start out as megalithic. And if Atlantis is one of the first cities ever to have existed in the world, it probably was not a megalithic city. In fact, I think that if Atlantis was destroyed in a single day and night, because their buildings were so simple, that could have sparked the genesis for megalithic architecture. That could have been the reason, the pivotal moment when humans decided to start building structures that could not be destroyed in a single day by a flood. So if you look at the structures and the buildings around in Ouadane and you imagine what they would have looked like after getting smashed with a wave the size of Mauritania, folks, nothing would be left. All the rubble was spread out on the cliff sides. That's exactly what it would look like, and that's exactly what you see. And walking around the Richat, it does feel like it is completely natural and untouched. It feels like it hasn't been touched in 10,000 years, but we have to remember that 12,000 years ago, you can look in Wikipedia, if you search the section under archaeology of the Richat, you can see that numerous concordant radiocarbon dates from freshwater fossils and fluvial deposits. The Richat was filled with water around 12,000 BC, from 8,000 to 15,000 BC. This has been proven through numerous radiocarbon dates. So these basins were filled with water. We know that for a fact at the time that Atlantis was supposed to have existed. Now think about how attractive of a place this would have been to Neolithic people. You've got these rings of water. They probably had fish in them. They probably had food in them. If you look at the mineralogy of the region, they have crystals. They have all sorts of minerals, precious metals. I mean, this would have been the best place to build a city in the Neolithic era. You would have access to such abundant food, metals, minerals, everything. So would it have been an ideal place to build a city? Yes. If you look at the town of Ouadane, it's already an incredibly ancient city. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So that is interesting too, because there's already this ancient city at the mouth of the Richat using the building techniques that Plato describes exactly. I mean, spot on match. What else? If you look in the basins, you do see cracks of mud, and it's very easy to imagine a time when these were just impassable mudflats. But then if you look at the surrounding region as well, of the Sahara essentially, and if you think of a flood the size of Mauritania washing over it, that's exactly what you would have, would be these impossible mudflats. So also, the entire region of Mauritania, south of the Richat and south of Attar and Ouadane, and is just one flat plain. The entire time you're driving to Attar and to Ouadane, you're just driving over a flat plain. And then once you get close to the Richat, there's these massive mountains that just rise out of the plains, and it looks like the Grand Canyon, and it is amazing, and it's stunning, and it's beautiful. So listen, no one can say for sure whether or not the Richat is Atlantis, and until we find some artifacts, until an excavation occurs, there's just no way to say for certain one way or another. There is no sign of civilization there whatsoever. But if they had these simple buildings like Plato described that got smashed with a massive wave, the likes of which we can't even comprehend, there would be nothing left. If you look at the tops of the Richat, they are completely flat and level. It would be an ideal place to build any sort of house, temple, structure, because it's flat. I mean, the first thing you do when you're building a house on a home site is to level it, right? The first thing that any construction engineer will do when they're building a structure is to create a level surface upon which to build. And when you get up onto the rings of the Richat, that's exactly what you find. Was it formed naturally? Was it formed by humans? It doesn't matter. It would still be an ideal place to build any structure because it's level. Whether or not it was leveled by natural processes or by humans, either way, it's ideal for building. So if you were a Neolithic people and you had happened upon the Richat, it's filled with water, it's flowing with minerals and abundant natural resources, there's food, there's fish. I mean, this would have been the most ideal place to build your city if you lived in the region. They find artifacts all over the place. I've seen numerous people selling arrowheads that they've found, stone spheres that they've found. So I think we're just going to need a lot more eyes on this. I think, my adventures with the Richat are only just beginning. I want as many eyes on this as possible because I was pretty excited about it going into it. And then my excitement started to wane as you walk around and you realize there's no megaliths, there's no evidence of ancient civilization. But then you realize that Plato never described a megalithic city there. He described a city of simple buildings. And simple buildings would not have survived in any way, shape, or form. But I will tell you that filled with water, with these perfectly level surfaces, this would have been the perfect place to build your ancient city. So I'm heading home right now. My mind is still kind of blown. Honestly, I'm gonna be going back. I think that we need to get lots of eyes on this. We need to go out there with geologists. We need to figure out if there is any evidence of civilization. I still think this could have been Atlantis. If Atlantis was essentially a Neolithic civilization that also had metals, when you think of the access to metals and minerals that they had or would have had just by living on the cliffs and the plains of these rings, I mean, there is literally gold and crystals and diamonds just flowing into the veins of the Richat structure. And just think about Neolithic people having direct access to that kind of abundance. I think it would have led to the exact prosperity that Plato describes the city of Atlantis having. So if you want to go to the Richat structure, if you want to go to Mauritania and have incredible adventures through the desert with wild camels, maybe you'll see something that no one else sees, maybe you'll stumble upon some clue or observation, get in touch with me. Send me an email. Find my email on the About section of this page. Drop me a line. I'm going to be putting together a group of people to head out there again, maybe 5 to 10 people. We'd love to have you. If you are passionate about researching ancient civilizations and finding Atlantis, and again, folks, I think the jury is still out as to whether or not the Richat Structure is or isn't Atlantis. No one can make a definitive argument either way. I mean, that much is a given. But I will say this, if the Richat Structure is not Atlantis, then we should be looking for something exactly like the Richat Structure for Atlantis that would have offered the rings of land, the minerals, the precious metals. Everything at the Richat Structure is exactly what you would expect to find at Atlantis. The black, red, and white rocks. I mean, everything. If the Richat Structure is not Atlantis, we are looking for another Richat Structure. And I don't think we can conclude one way or the other whether or not the Richat Structure is. We need to get geologists out there. We need to do some excavations. We need people combing the ground. I think it would be hugely beneficial to have groups of people walking around the rings. Let's walk around all the rings and see if we can find anything. So that's it for now. Again, if you want to come to Mauritania, if you want to come to the Richat Structure, send me an email, drop me a line. I'm going back. I think there's more to this. There's more to the Richat for us to understand. There's more to the story of Atlantis for us to understand. And I think that the Richat Structure provides us a unique window into studying Atlantis, whether or not it is the site of Atlantis, because if it's not, folks, Atlantis was somewhere exactly like the Richat Structure. I guarantee you.